Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Passionate Workforce Podcast, the show that explores how leaders can build organizations where people love what they do and are inspired to give their best every day. I'm your host, Nick Capman, President and CEO of the FDA Group and author of the #1 bestseller, The Passionate Workforce. In this podcast, we dive into real world conversations with leaders, thinkers, and change makers who are shaping the future of work. So let's get started. So today, we're going to be talking about as leadership responsibilities grow, how do you handle tough conversations and stay grounded where there are no clear right answers? And to help me answer this is my guest, Sterling Chung. Hey, Sterling, how are you?
Hey, Nicholas, thanks for having me on. Uh, I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. So before we dive in, would you kindly introduce yourself?
Yeah, Sterling Chung, I'm Chief Regulatory and Quality Officer at Aurion Biotech. I've been here about 3.5 years. And I think the biggest thing that gives me a unique perspective on leadership is just having gone from literally the ground level, getting exposure to kind of what all of regulatory and quality is about, and just growing from there, getting opportunities at different big or small companies, and then having these unique opportunities to do major submissions or go through big changes at the company or things that pivot or shift the direction of the company. And so going through tough times, I mean, the good times are easy, but the tough times are, I think, where you really understand what leadership's all about.
Amen. Absolutely. Well, without further ado, let's jump right in. So, when did you first realize that leadership often requires making decisions where there is no clear right answer?
I think uh, when you're going through the organization coming up, you realize you think that all the answers are clear, but as you move in and get into positions of higher leadership, you realize that there's a multitude of factors that go into, let's say, a single decision that you thought was easier just from a purely regulatory or quality mindset. And I think what happens is you start learning to balance just the different information that comes in, and you try to make the best educated guess as to what the right decision is for the organization and as a company, how we want to proceed forward, right? Based on sometimes just limited facts of what's available, you're going to have to make the best guess that you possibly can.
Hmm. How would you say that you've evolved over time in terms of defining what responsibility and leadership means to you?
Yeah, I think I've been humbled more than anything over the years of what leadership really means. I really admire these servant leaders that really think about who they're serving or what they're doing. And, it could be from an individual or to the organization or to patients or to doctors, specifically in our field of pharmaceuticals and biotech, it's something that I think you realize that um, you have a lot more customers than you realize. It's a lot easier when you're within a function, just answering to the person right above you. But when you start answering to the larger organization itself, to patients, to doctors, there's a lot more factors that you have to input into before you can make those decisions.
Mhm.
Also, I think what I've learned is that um, even what seems like really simple answers require a lot of thought and a lot
Mhm.
of just trying to figure out what the ramifications of those decisions will be, and then having the courage to say, I'm still going to keep it simple and we'll see how it moves forward, instead of spiraling into the what ifs or having these regrets. You just have to clearly get knocked down and pick yourself back up and then forget. I mean, kind of like what they talk about with QBs in football, right? You get knocked down, you get sacked, you got to try and make the next play. Still
Mm.
got to move the ball forward. And I feel like as leaders, that's probably some of the best advice that you could give or get, is the fact that you have to still continue to pick yourself up, because people within your function or within your organization are looking for you to make the next right decision. They know that you're not gonna, hit the ball 1,000%. That's why, like in baseball, it's like people who bat like 300, I mean, they're admired, right? Is because they can at least hit it a third of the time. And
Mm,
so you're trying to just average out making good decisions and averaging that out.
mm. One of the things that I've learned and borrowed time and time again is the formula for trust, which
Mm,
is trust is character times competence. So you need both if you're going to have the trust of the people that report to you. You need to have good character, or they're not going to trust you. You also
yeah.
have to be competent, or they're not going to trust you. So if you have those two, then you're headed in the right direction for leading a group of people toward the promised land. One of the things that comes with, decision making and leadership is they can often be really emotionally charged. So when you know that you're going to go into a conversation that's emotionally charged because of a decision that's been made, do you prepare? And if you do, what does that preparation look like?
I'd like to say that I'm always prepared for these emotionally charged conversations, but they do, I would say about a quarter or half the time, they happen kind of right away. A situation develops very quickly and you have to deal with it. I can give you the best case scenario of how I prepare, and then I
Mm,
can tell you what I adjust to when that conversation happens actually fairly quickly, faster than I anticipate.
mm,
I think in the first case, for those emotionally charged conversations that you're going to have about decision making, about personnel, about what we do with the funding, these things are, you have to think about it from the sense of what is best both from a company standpoint and then what makes sense for the individual that you're talking to. And I think if you could find a happy median between those two interests, and hopefully they're aligned, but not a lot of time. It's not often that those two are aligned. There's a lot of times the company wants to go in one direction, and then the individual wants to go in a different direction. And part of it is just trying to be honest about where the situation's at and understanding and having that empathy to say, I do understand the background or the situation you're in, and here's additional context about why this decision is being made or why we're even having this conversation. So I feel like the biggest preparation you can do is come prepared with facts of why it is that you're having that conversation or why that decision is being made and trying to rationally talk it through.
mm,
And then listening, I think, is the second biggest key ingredient because sometimes people just want to explain themselves
mm,
and want to be heard. A lot of times, you're working with very smart individuals. It's not like they don't know the answer themselves or they can't clearly see the situation.
mm,
But I feel like as human beings, a lot of times we just want to be heard. We want to tell our story about why we're in the situation that we're in or why we disagree with the decision that the company's made. And so I feel like a good chunk of what I do too is listen, and then if there's little micro adjustments that can be made from the feedback that I get, I do try to incorporate that into whatever that conversation is going in, and acknowledging that there are parts that are correct. And then the second
mm,
part is I think um, when the situation evolves very quickly. I think there's only two things that I take away. One is what is the goal of that conversation and what is it that needs to come out of that conversation? And then second, and still part of the first one is just listening to how the situation came about. Because at that point I'm not going to have all the facts or understand how it came about. And so a lot of times it's just listening to why this became bigger than it should, you know?
mm, mm. Yeah, I definitely hear you on the empathy point. One of the things you said that I think needs to be underscored is the coming with facts about the reason a decision was made. And I remember, I don't even know what my son came to talk to me about one time, but he came to me and he asked me to do something, or he told me he was going to do something. And I remember my heart rate started to increase, and I was getting pretty annoyed very quickly with whatever it was that he had said. And then immediately after he finished that, he explained why. and it went
Mm.
right back down. I said, okay, it makes sense. And he left my office, and I said, his name's Vinny. I said, Vinny, come back here. And I said, I just want to let you know the fact that you, and I explained exactly what I had felt. I said, when you told me you were going to do X or you wanted me to do Y, whatever it was, I was really starting to get pretty aggravated. But then when you explained it to me, I understood. And that was, whether you know how important that was or not, I just wanted to let you know that that was really good of you. So please do that again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that should be highlighted.
And you know, the other thing that I think that needs to be highlighted from what you just said is accountability. So accountability as a leader to say, I've done wrong or
Mm,
I misunderstood. Let me own this and let's fix it together, right? And I think more than anything, um, the organization and people relate better when you do take that accountability. And I think that's a great thing that you brought up, Nicholas, with your son Vinny. It's just you could be dismissive because it's your child, right? And you could say, "Hey, no harm, no foul. I'll see you again in a few minutes." But I think true leadership is accountability. I mean, I know that employees that I had, and even my own family, I think the biggest thing that they appreciate is just the humbleness and the accountability. Because as human beings, we're not perfect. It's just that's how we're made, you know. And so it's like it is one of the things that I feel like if we truly own this, we can improve from it.
mm,
But if it's just from a standpoint of, I'm the boss and I gotta tell you things, there's really no growth either way.
mm.
So yeah, I appreciate that example. That's that's a really good point that you make.
Well, that was a successful example. Let me give you an unsuccessful example. Uh, so now this time I'll bring my daughter in. So
Yeah.
this is recent. That other one happened a while ago. This is recent. I'm not going to get into the details of the issue, but it wasn't the biggest deal in the world, but it was big enough. And I screwed up. I said some things I shouldn't have said, and I acted in a way I shouldn't have acted, right?
Yeah.
And so I apologized to her, and she accepted it. And I said, here's what you got to understand. When I was your age, I thought adults had everything figured out, and the truth is they don't. They're just as fallible as you. They have a lot more experience, so they don't repeat a lot of the same mistakes that you will eventually make. But we're still imperfect human beings, and we have to request the grace of God to forgive us when we do make those mistakes. So I almost used it as a kind of a get out of jail free card, that hey, I'm probably going to make another mistake, so hopefully you'll give me the same grace that you did this time around. Yeah. Um, the other thing I wanted to say is just about the humbleness and the transparency. Um, I heard this other thing that I thought was really important, and this comes down to that formula of trust is character times competence,
Mm.
which it's okay for you as a leader to admit when you've made a mistake. However, well, actually, hold on, let me take a step back. First, let me talk about transparency. So when it comes to transparency, that's very important because my experience has shown me that if you aren't transparent with the story, everybody's going to make up their own story in their head. Okay, something's going on. This is what I think it is. That therefore that is what is happening until I learn otherwise. 9 times out of 10, whatever they've created is much worse than what the reality is. So that's my argument for transparency.
Mm.
And when it comes to being accountable, that's great. But the truth will only set you free with hope.
Yeah.
Meaning, hey, I screwed up, but here is how we're going to fix things. The company is going through challenges. However, here's what we've got planned to turn it around, right? Because if you're just, hey, I screwed up, hopefully I don't do it again, like that, you need a little more than that, right? So anyway, I wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, yeah. I think if you can't see progress, you're in purgatory, basically.
Mm.
And I feel like sometimes as employees with your boss, you feel like you are trapped in purgatory because you realize that there isn't that hope that they'll grow with you, you know? There's times where, and this is, I think the biggest thing is like you you hope that whatever relationship you're in as an employer-employee relationship, and because we're all in some kind of, whether you're CEO or not, you're in some kind of relationship like that. And I think the biggest thing for me, and this is a mindset that I've had um, ever since I was little, was the only thing I want to do is continue to grow. Because
Mm,
if you don't grow and you don't learn, you become stagnant, and part of that is I might not start out the race the fastest, but I hope to go the longest distance, having learned, because those lessons that you learn take you so much farther, influence, I think, I wouldn't say better decisions in the future, but more informed decisions of what could be because you've learned from those hard mistakes, you know?
mm,
And sometimes it catches me by surprise um, when I talk to people who are like true leaders, true thinkers, and there's some of the most humblest people in the room. They're just
oh
like,
yeah,
"Hey, I only know this much. Like, I'm deep in this part, but there's still so much more to learn." And I take that away as to your point, hope that like, hey, I could continue to grow like them. I could continue to learn. I mean, wherever I started is not where I'm going to finish. I want to finish further away from the start line
yeah.
than anybody else, right? Because will continue to have this mentality of learning.
Yeah. One of the researchers slash authors that I have an enormous amount of respect for, and I will say I took a selfie with her, is Brene Brown, and she had one of the most highly viewed ta TED Talks of all time. She wrote
Oh,
a couple of really successful books, The Power of Vulnerability, Dare to Lead. And she talks a lot. Has done a lot of research in the idea of vulnerability, and vulnerability, I think, is really important. And obviously, there's limits to everything, right? But in general, being open about whatever the situation is, I think it communicates a couple things to the listener, especially when you're sitting in a leadership position, which is, um, you know, they're human just like you, right? But also it's okay to go through the struggles that you're going through. So as a leader, if you're open about your struggles, right, then they go, oh, okay. So so I'm experiencing struggles, but you are too. Okay, so this is normal. Because the alternative is if every day you're coming into work and everything's great and you're driving fancy cars and you never get in arguments with your wife, then you know what the listener hears is, man, I'm screwed up.
yeah,
I don't have everything figured out, and God, I'm not much younger than this person. Geez, I'm way behind,
yeah,
right? And that's not
yeah,
the truth. That's not the truth. So I think you certainly do yourself a disservice by not being vulnerable, open, honest, and transparent. But more so, you're doing the listener a disservice by not being open, honest, and transparent.
yeah.
So let me dig into some of these issues when it because really what we're talking about is leadership difficult decisions. So oftentimes in the most difficult of situations, there's facts, there's opinions, there's emotions, they're all pulling in different directions. What are when there seems to be a lot of chaos and confusion, what are the principles you return to that help you decide on how to move forward?
You bring up something that I think has helped me in my career, and it's a recent learning within the last like 5 to 10 years. Um, I've always had this principle of KISS, I like to keep it simple, and
Mm,
part of it too is you confuse your own story, and like you said, you confuse listeners or the audience if you can't tell it cleanly. There are going to
mm,
be situations where you have to explain certain things more in depth, and that's
mm,
a technical discussion that you shouldn't shy away from. That's one of the core principles I've always lived by. The second principle that I've recently learned, it's from a colleague of mine, and his name's Andrew Torres. I've worked with him for a while now. One of the biggest things that he's helped me understand is facts can be distilled down to tables. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of inputs and there's a lot of emotions. But if you can agree with the person or the group that you're working with, what are the fundamental key things that we need to get away or pull out from the data? And you agree on the X and the Y of things, or the left column and the header across
Mm,
the table, you can pretty much figure out very non-emotionally what the data
mm,
says about it. It could be misleading because where you get that information, the caveats around that information, yes, but in order to simplify the story
mm,
and to understand it better, because I feel like a lot of the reason why there's opinions or it's emotionally charged is because it's not clear to anybody the so-called right or wrong of things, right? And so
mm,
if we both agree that the data set is a data set and this is what we should go off of, and this is where we're all trying to go to as a goal or the hope of what we want to do, then distilling it down to basically, hey, is this reading out the way that we want it to read out? That's I feel like um, the best way to make it less emotional about things. And one of the things I've actually taken into principle, so that's more in a CMC quality type environment where data is constantly being generated and you're constantly trying to um, um, analyze huge amounts of whatever data is coming out of manufacturing, right? Um, and then the testing of it. I feel like where you apply that in places where it's a little bit less certain, a little bit more um, um, softer parts of hard science is in other areas like clinical, right? So in clinical, there's hard results, yes, there's endpoints, but there's a lot more variables that you factor in. And so a lot of times, what I like to do is just in a way of organizing information in my own mind to understand where I'm trying to go with the information is very simply putting out, hey, in a table, these are all the studies that were completed. What are we taking away from these studies? How do we want to tell the stories around that? And that helps simplify what would otherwise be emotionally challenging. And here's what I mean. So there's enough secondary endpoints in most clinical studies where everybody has a feeling on which horse that they want to bet on. And it's like, hey, this secondary endpoint is really important to me. We should put it in. And what happens is sometimes that endpoint doesn't matter in the overall scheme of the story you're trying to tell of the drug and the evolution of it. And so if you can say in a very matter of fact way, if this is the arc of the story that we're trying to tell, here's all the data that's supporting it. How do you feel that this piece that you feel very strongly about as a secondary endpoint fits into this storytelling? Um, and if you could organize it kind of in a table that says, here's the studies that we've done, here's a phase of them, here's what we've done in terms of the primary endpoint, because the primary endpoint's the conclusion of the story. The secondary endpoints are basically the supporting cast of that. And it's like, hey, does this really support the endpoint, or is this something that is kind of standalone by itself? And that example is one where, when there's a lot of data that needs to be processed and everybody kind of has their own horse in the race, that's how I use that table analogy to map
mm.
it out in my own mind so I could be clear to that other person.
Yeah. Couple things that kind of jumped out at me as you were going through that explanation is the importance of communication.
Yeah. Oh,
And again, I've never spoken about my kids so much during a podcast, but I'll go back. So my son, so we had two core values at our house. No lying, no disrespect. We
yeah.
added a third one, which is communicate to be understood. And that's because, I think in my household, with my children, there's so much, and I think for a lot of parents, there's really an effort to get them um, successful in academics.
Yeah.
And academics is, G.I. Joe, half the battle. The other half is communication, and I think it's good for us to understand as leaders how important. And I bet a lot of us already know this, but I just really want to underscore that it's not necessarily always what you say; it's how you say it,
Yeah.
and your ability to communicate in a way to be understood is really important. The other thing you said. you were hinting about how things aren't always 100% right or 100% wrong. Just from a personal standpoint, one of the things that, and this is mildly off topic, but one of the things I've really appreciated about Hollywood and entertainment is there's no clear delineation like it was back in the day of hero versus villain. I really like seeing a character and they start off good. Like, was it the Game of Thrones?
Oh yeah.
Khaleesi, the blonde one, is
Oh
that her
yeah,
name?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Remember she was like really good, and then she like started killing too many people, and you're like, I don't know about that one, you
Yeah.
know. Or there was like the mother of Joffrey, and she was evil, but then you kind of saw the human element of her, and you're trying to decide, is this person good or bad? And I think just in this can help in leadership. I think it can help in society.
Yeah,
Is nobody's evil. Some people have more evil tendencies than others, but nobody's
yeah,
100% evil. They're still mothers, brothers, sisters, fathers, mothers, right?
yeah.
And nobody's purely good, and oftentimes my pastor will, talk about him as a human in the flesh, right? Because
Yeah,
he's not perfect. So
yeah,
I think understanding there is no such thing as pure good, pure evil. As much as it might seem like it, and as much as you might think somebody's crazy, if you say they're crazy, that means you're not willing to put in the effort to understand them.
yeah,
Right? So
yep,
so skip that, hey, they're crazy or they're an idiot or they're evil.
yeah,
Take that extra step to try to understand, wait, you know what? They're still a husband, a father, a daughter, a mother, a cousin, a friend,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So there is a human element. Let me try to understand where they're coming from. And I think that exercise requires a little bit more energy, but I think it produces some understanding and outcomes that you wouldn't have experienced otherwise.
yeah,
Um, well, I think we're really going in a good direction here, so let's not deviate.
yeah,
Some of these decisions are going to impact people's livelihoods. They're going to impact people's careers, their sense of purpose. How do you handle that without be feeling detached and overwhelmed?
yeah. Great question. I think I'm still struggling with it. I try to find the balance between enough detachment and enough empathy to make good decisions, and or good decisions, in my own mind, good decisions. But um, you know, I can tell you that I've had experiences where um, for the individual, sometimes it might seem like it's the hardest decision that you've made, just because, like you said, there's a family impact, there's an income impact type, and a career impact. But I've also understood that those people who are willing to grow and learn, and maybe, I feel like another analogy is, it depends on what part of the roller coaster you're on, right? And so sometimes we all think that the roll it's just an even road driving. Um, Flat surface, we keep going straight, but I feel like life has always been more of a roller coaster ride. Sometimes you catch the highest highs,
Hmm.
everything's working out and it's working well. Sometimes you're in a period where it's like you're just struggling to break even with
Hmm.
what's there. And um, the decision that impacts people, I think, is the weightiest decision as leaders that we all have. We there's a You can't not have but a human element to that, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I understand like when organizations say, hey, for business purposes, we're gonna cut 5 to 10%. Yeah, that decision's actually easy. You're just doing it as a percentage, and then you're saying across the board, we're going to base it on these factors, right? And make it arbitrary. But when you as a leader are confronted with decision making where this is not right for the individual and it's not right for the organization, it's a tough call still as leaders to say it's not going to work out. How do we work past this so so the employee can benefit and the organization can benefit? And obviously we all want to tell the redemption arc of things where
Hmm.
like, hey, we can like rehabilitate or work with the people to bring them to their fullest potential.
Mm.
And a lot of times when people get confronted with hard realities, they wake up and they react to it, right? And so they they themselves try to understand how to um, work with you to get to that goal that you're facing. But there's other times where like there isn't either an interest or it's not something that is where whatever state they're at is not it just doesn't work out. And so the sometimes a better decision to make is to say, this isn't working. We got to make a decision that's good for you because usually, Nicholas, half the time or more, they're not happy themselves
Mm.
because to have that conversation, they know something's not been working, right?
Mm.
And whatever efforts that you yourself might have put in as a leader, the efforts that they might have put in, still not working. And so the way I feel it is, um, the sometimes the best decision is to say, hey, this isn't working, and let's be honest about it, and say this is maybe something that is not, and you could tell how I'm struggling here to even explain this, how hard it is, but it's sometimes it just doesn't work out for the employee and the employer that it's not it's not working, right? And
Yeah.
so better to part ways and be frank about it and transparent and honest
Mm.
than to say to put blame or assign it. It's like we all own it. I mean, we hired you for a reason. We saw potential. We know the background that you had, but in this situation, it just isn't working out. And it took me like what? It feels like 5 minutes to try and explain that. It's hard because we as human beings do care. Like we
Yeah.
care about individuals and we factor that in. But I realize sometimes there's too much of an overcorrection in that way. And it's actually not good for the employer or the employee.
Mm.
And I've had times where it's actually worked out best when it's parted ways and they move on to something that's better for them,
Oh yeah, for
a
sure.
different situation.
Yeah. So there's a really good book by Jocko Willink called Extreme Ownership. And essentially it taught me that everything's my fault, right? Which it sounds like it's put me in a prison, but it really is liberating. So to use an extreme example, if my wife goes to CVS today and gets shot, guess what? That's my fault. I should have
Yeah,
known where she was going. I should have made sure I understood the day, the time, that she was prepared to protect herself if she was going into an environment like that.
yeah,
So that really, I think, is quite empowering. And when it comes to people not working out in an organization, you either hired them that way or you trained them that way.
yeah,
Right. And so a lot of at the end of the day, it's still your fault because you're the one that made, well, not all the time, but oftentimes you're the one that brought him in and it didn't work out. Here's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned very recently.
mm,
And actually, let me define very within the past couple of years.
yeah,
Is I had been doing a terrible job for the most part, not all the time,
mm,
but of letting people go.
mm,
And and the reason is we as an organization had spent so much time in developing all this goodwill.
yeah,
And then when you part, what I was doing wrong, and and this is a very, very specific thing, is lawyers oftentimes will tell you to keep your mouth shut
yeah,
because they're trying to protect you against litigation,
yeah,
right? And that really made all of these separations very cold.
yep,
As if we hadn't spent all that time together, as if we hadn't had all those conversations.
yeah,
And so I have made a decision that I am not listening to my lawyers anymore when it comes to letting people go.
yeah,
I am going to support them. I'm going to be open and I'm going to do those things. And you know what? It might put me at risk. It
yeah,
might put me, but you know what else is putting me at risk? Is by closing them off, following the advice of lawyers, and knowing that I've ruined a relationship that could ruin my reputation. Right? Now, here's the thing that I thought was really interesting, which when in psychology, Maya Angelou says, you'll never remember what somebody did to you, but you'll remember how they made you feel. Well, how they remember you, how you make them feel is based off of two things, and it's not what you think. It's what
Oh,
is the best thing you did for them, and what is the last thing you did for them.
oh, interesting.
Very
Very, that's
interesting.
surprising. That's really
Very,
surprising, actually.
very, you think it's the best and the worst, or the
Yeah,
first and the
yeah,
last, right?
yeah.
It's
That's
the,
exactly where my
yeah.
brain went. Yeah,
So it's the best and the last, right? So the
yeah,
best thing you've done is the best thing you've ever done, and that's it. But in these types of situations, guess what? Half of how they're going to remember you is how you handle those final moments.
interesting.
And so, so that is a really big learning that I had to do after several failed attempts of trying to do the prudent thing when it comes to separations and
Yeah,
realizing I keep getting this advice and it's not working.
yeah.
And even with all the honesty, explanations, and empathies, I still felt like there was more to do. So that's my 2 cents.
It brings up something that, so I have a few doctor friends, and this whole bedside manners thing, I think, also speaks to what you're saying is people who leave that impression of you, like you said, support and understanding and empathy, but still saying, "Hey, this went wrong," or this didn't work out. And like you said, the ownership piece of it. I think fundamentally people are people, and there's one-offs always. There's always, in a curve or in data points, there's always that exception. But like generally, I would be very interested to what you said, like listening to lawyers' advice that say, keep it very factual and don't say much,
Right.
versus those people who actually try to say, hey, this is a hard thing and I'm working with you, and it doesn't make me feel any better than you do, but this has to be done, right? Type of deal.
Well, they, all right. So politely speaking, they don't care how you feel,
Yes, yes, that's true. Yeah,
right? Right.
yeah, yeah, that's very
Um,
true.
so there's that. But what are you going to do, right? And one of the things that I have decided to do is nobody's going to be left out hanging. I mean,
Yeah,
and unless it's a very extreme firing,
yes,
for a cause, nobody's going to be left out hanging. So one of the things that we've implemented is a program where we help them find their next position.
oh wow, that's awesome.
Right. And so I think that's trying to stay in line with kind of where things are inside, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because I knew in the past things weren't sitting right. What needed to change? Two things. A, I needed to not shut people off
yeah,
because of what the lawyers were telling me. And two is I needed to just, rather than saying, here's why we did it and I really feel bad, actually doing something about it.
yeah,
Prove,
yeah, yeah,
prove to the extent that you can prove that you actually do care about what happens after them and see what you can do in terms of helping them find a new position.
yeah.
Yep. So anyway, I digress.
I
Um,
appreciate the digression.
yeah. Let's talk about, we talked a little bit about some of the principles that you held. What are some other habits, beliefs, or practices that you look to when you're involved in difficult decision making and conversations?
Yeah. Um, I think I spend it's kind of grown first for health reasons, and then it just became my thing,
Hmm.
is to go out for running.
Hmm.
I actually never liked running. You could ask the college version of me and
Yeah.
they think you're crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but because of the stress and just being out transitioning from college to the work environment, and eating poorly,
Mm.
one of my physicians said, "Hey, you need to actually like start walking or running to kind of balance the stress and what you're eating." And so, um, from that, what I realized was I really do appreciate the quiet moments. So I'm
Mm.
probably the only person on the trail who runs without headphones, without a watch, without a phone. And I just go out there to find my own balance and quiet. So I could, if I really, if it's something that's really bothering me, I work it out as I'm working through it. Because there's
Mm.
something physical and mental that kind of mesh when you're in a zone. your body's in a zone and then your mind is in a
Mm,
zone to work out a problem that's difficult or tough to deal with. And so
mm,
uh that's been kind of my secret sauce to
mm,
come at difficult situations or difficult or hard situations
mm.
where I need to really be balanced and think about things.
Yeah, I have to tell you this.
Yeah,
I have to. Silence has been my new thing. And when I say new thing, again, we're defining what new, recent, all that means, right? I mean
yeah.
within 2 months.
Oh,
Is
wow.
all right. So we grew up being bored because we didn't have iPhones, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Remember being
Yeah.
bored, right?
Yeah. A lot.
Right? And then there's the scrolling and the reels and all that stuff. And to be honest, I like that it kind of learns because it's given me things I care about, like history facts, and I'm
Yeah.
fascinated with black holes and all
Yeah.
that so and jokes, and so I really like what's in my feed. It's not all trash.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, I've noticed that I finally hit the point
Mhm.
of overstimulation.
Oh,
And I've started driving without the radio on. Not even forget the podcast or anything, just silence.
huh.
And it's really now I know our brain creates plaque, and I know sleep helps to remove that plaque.
Yeah.
I have no medical reason to believe this, but I do feel a cleansing feeling mentally by experiencing silence.
Yeah.
And so I have a no reason to believe, yet I do, that it's kind of cleaning out some of the plaque in my brain just by being silent. Also, there's been moments where I'll, kind of go in my living room. I've got a fish tank, and I won't turn the TV on,
Huh.
and I won't look at my phone, and
Yeah.
I'll sit there for 15 or 20 minutes and just stare at my fish tank. For anybody that watched Seinfeld, there's this one episode where Terry says, "Hey, Lane, what'd you do last night?" And she's like, "Nothing." He's like, "Well, I know you did nothing, but like, what'd you do?" She's like, "No, really, I did nothing. I just stared at the wall." Right? And so sometimes it's nice to stare at the wall. So for anybody that is listening that has felt overstimulated or constantly looking at your phone or your TV or your radio, um, and it's a very easy thing to do. So
Yeah.
if somebody like tries it and hates it, then don't do it, right? But if you try it and then you're like, "Ooh, that was kind of nice,"
Yeah.
then maybe try it more often. But if you don't enjoy it, don't do it. But
Yeah.
if you try it and you're like, "Oh, that was kind of, I like kind of like that,"
Yeah.
try it out. So that's my new thing is silent moments, especially in the car. Nothing.
I like the point that you're making because I think fundamentally I'm just trying to get away and find my peace. Find my silence, like you said. Because I think it blows people's mind. They're like, how do you not get lost? Or how do you I was like, I do pay attention and I got pretty good sense of direction, but the reason why I go out there is we can't go like on a weekly basis to a retreat, a wellness retreat, and find complete silence. Like, I think it's with intentionality, like you're doing, that says, I'm going to take these 20 or 30 minutes and I'm going to find the time to be silent with myself. And this seems so counterintuitive to where our culture's at or like where things are at. Because it's constant, right? Even at this job, it's like constant information being overloaded, right?
Mm,
But um, I realize if I'm gonna be making healthier decisions, not for myself, but also like good decisions for the company, I need that. That's actually an intentional time that I need to spend, like you said, like cleansing myself of
mm,
all these thoughts that are just piled up in my brain, and
mm,
then I get a chance to empty the trash bin and be
mm.
like, I'm resetting because I've intentionally done this.
Another thing that I was just thinking about is, why that might actually be another reason why this might be a good idea is if you've ever lost something and you can't find it. Did you ever notice once you stop looking for it, you find it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe. this could apply. Maybe sometimes if we're looking for the answers to something, maybe you should give yourself some grace and stop looking.
Yeah,
And then and let, the universe, the Holy Spirit, what have you, provide those answers to you. Or
yeah.
I also like to say the little man that lives inside my stomach, right? So,
Yeah.
give them the silence they need so that you can listen to them,
Yeah.
right?
Because, pressured situations and this constant information, I think distracts you from fundamentally, like you've gotten as far and I've gotten as far as we have. And most people, because they've intuitively, there's things that they've learned that they've assimilated and helps them when they have the silence and the clarity to be like, this is this is the decision that should be made, right? Or this is how I should think about it. And to your point, when you give that silence, it helps bring up things that when you concentrate, you can't remember. But when
Mm,
you let your mind go blank, it brings back the things that like are always on on the fringes of your mind. That's like, hey, the keys are actually not in the basket because the other place that you really like dropping it is on the nightstand. It's like, go check the nightstand. And it's not like you consciously have a decision, but
mm,
there's something on the edges of where your mind's
mm,
at that it come when there is that time for reflection, it
mm.
comes in?
Yeah. Now, here's another thing, and then I promise all the listeners will wrap it up.
Oh yeah.
But here's another misunderstanding a lot of us have is we think we found out everything as it pertains to science and understanding, and
Yeah.
we haven't, right?
Yeah.
If you told somebody 200 years ago that you're going to send moving pictures to the other side of the world instantaneously, they'd say, you've been experimenting with plants too much, right?
Yeah.
So there's still much more for us to learn that
Yeah.
we don't understand, right? And one of the things that kind of is in this realm is I believe in telepathy.
Mm,
I just don't think we've proven it yet.
mm,
I can't tell you how many times me and my wife know what each other is thinking, and there's no good reason.
yeah.
Or she'll remember something from 5 years ago she hasn't thought about in 5 years, and now I'm thinking of it. And and what the hell is that, right? So 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 anyway, in that kind of vibe, I'm saying that maybe there is something to dealing with difficult conversations as a leader where silence, could provide some value.
Yeah.
And this has been a really awesome talk, and I really appreciate you in your insight and you're willing to engage in this conversation. So let's wrap this up in a bow. Okay?
Yeah.
So as leadership responsibilities grow, how do you handle tough conversations and stay grounded when there is no clear right answer? What would you like to leave the audience with before we close?
I think the theme of the discussions that we've had is, you know, people do understand when you try and bring your authentic self. And the longer that you avoid the tougher conversations, the more things get misunderstood and fester.
Mm,
And so, one of the key things that you said is you communicate to be understood.
mm,
So, and I think another thing that you brought up was it's really not about you as a leader. When you're like in that servant type of leadership style, and it's really giving that person the opportunity to be heard. And we talked about silence. Maybe they just want silence for a little bit before they tell you or respond to you. Um, the biggest thing is making sure that those avenues are there where you can talk about things that are hard, and it helps to heal wounds, and it helps to actually make things move forward, like helps things move forward because there is less misunderstanding, right?
mhm,
Because one of the crazy things, I forgot what I was watching, but it was talking about languages. There's X amount of languages technically, like English, Spanish, on all these others that are there. But even within those languages, there's been times where I've been saying something and people misunderstood because you feel like you're speaking your own language, and to a certain extent, you are. And
mm.
part of, I think, a leader's job is to make sure that you overcome these barriers um, of misunderstanding, right? And to have these frank conversations with people.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we always know what we say, but we don't always know what they heard. So, so,
Very true. That's a
yeah.
good one. I'm gonna keep that.
Cool. Sterling, thank you so much for everybody listening. As always, thank you so much for joining me and Sterling on the Passionate Workforce podcast. If today's conversation resonated with you, please share it with a colleague or a leader who's passionate about building stronger, more inspired teams. Don't forget to subscribe at theFDAgroup.com/podcast for new episodes and follow the FDA Group on LinkedIn for ongoing insights about leadership, culture, and workforce excellence. To dive into these ideas, pick up a copy of my book, The Passionate Workforce, available wherever books are sold, also on Audible. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and keep building a passionate workforce.